Before we get started, can you picture a morning where you don't feel like you have 100 things to do before heading out the door? Well, my tried and true 5 lower carb breakfast recipes are here to help you do that and more. These recipes are packed with protein, healthy fats, and fiber to keep you full longer, so you're not battling those hunger pangs or sugar crashes by 10 a.m. And the best part, they're quick and easy to make the morning of or even beforehand, so you have a little leisure time in the morning to yourself before heading into work. If you're looking to have a little more peace of mind in the morning and avoid that mid-morning crash that has you snacking before lunch, just head over to betterwithcarbo.com/breakfast to receive your free copy of the 5 lower carb, quick and easy breakfast recipes. That's betterwithcarbo.com/breakfast. I know that it is tough to stop focusing on the number on the scale and to shift to how you feel as a true measure of health, but think about how you feel right now, paying so much attention to the number on the scale. You're overwhelmed, you're anxious, you're pressured, and it causes you to stress, which really moves you away from improving your health. And also, it makes you hate the journey that you're on, which means that you're less likely to stick to these new habits long term. I'm Krissy Carbo, registered dietitian and host of the Inflamed in the Brain podcast. Here we cut through the confusion and complexity of inflammatory health to deliver straightforward, bite-sized strategies and information you can easily apply to your life. Not that long ago, I was lost in a sea of information and overwhelmed by the challenges of inflammation. But cut through years of trial, education, and self-discovery, I've learned to break free from the chaos of fad diets to cultivate a practical, anti-inflammatory lifestyle that not only helped me stabilize my own diagnosis, but thrive with it. Whether you're an autoimmune warrior yourself, or you're just trying to have a healthier, uncomplicated life, you're in the right place. Together, we'll explore realistic strategies that can make a profound difference in your life. So if you're ready to embrace a simpler, healthier way to live, let's dive in, learn, and grow together. Welcome to the Inflamed in the Brain podcast. Let's get started. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Inflamed in the Brain podcast. I'm Krissy, your host and favorite dietitian. And this is going to be a really juicy episode because we're going to be talking about how to know if your inflammation is improving outside of weight loss and expensive lab work. This is going to look different for you than how it looks for me, than how it looks for anyone else, because inflammatory symptoms are so different for everyone. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the episode, I do want to address your weight and inflammation. I've been a part of and witnessed conversations with folks who are pretty overwhelmed when it comes to their health because they've been told that they have to lose weight in order to decrease inflammation. And if you're here with me today, it's probably safe to say that you've been told the same thing as well. So I do want to preface this conversation by saying that your weight is not the root cause of inflammation. Your weight is not the root cause of inflammation. And because it isn't the root cause of inflammation, weight loss in and of itself will not make inflammation go away. There is legitimate research out there explaining how body fat can contribute to inflammation, but as with all things health and nutrition, there are nuances here. One study actually found that abdominal visceral fat, which is the fat around your organs, is really connected to higher levels of inflammatory markers like interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein or CRP all across all kinds of races and genders. So this is suggesting that visceral fat plays a key role in driving inflammation, but the relationship with other types of fat is different. So like thigh intermuscular fat, this is from the same study, had an inconsistent link with inflammation, while thigh subcutaneous fat, which is the fat that's underneath the skin, was actually associated with lower inflammation in some women. So, this is showing that not all fat types are harmful, and factors like fat location, the type of fat, and the person influence inflammation differently. So, if I know you and you're here listening to this, you might be thinking, okay, well, all I have to do is just work on losing that visceral fat. But I don't want you to hyper focus on this because you're going to stress yourself the F out. I'm telling you right now, there is no special diet that can target fat loss in particular areas of your body, like your belly or your thighs. And how and where you lose and gain weight really depends on some variables that we don't even have control over, like our genetics. So, when you hear about the link between visceral fat and inflammation, please don't stress. Practicing body acceptance and appreciation here is key. It's not cheesy, it's not trendy, it's not foo foo, it's not quack science. You can be healthy at any size, and focusing on bigger picture inflammatory triggers that you do have control over is going to be way more helpful to you and more sustainable than trying to change specific parts of your body. Cutting out and avoiding all the foods or over exercising isn't the answer and can actually increase inflammation in other ways, like raising stress, hormones, and weakening your immune system. I also want to remind you that you can also be losing weight by eating low calorie foods in small portions. But if those foods lack quality ingredients and you're hungry all the time, your cravings are through the roof, and you're stressed out because you hate what you're eating, you're still setting yourself up for unnecessary inflammatory exposures, either by stress or undernourishment or overeating because you're cutting out so many foods that your body is going into survival mode and causing you to overeat. And I have tons of other podcast episodes where I talk about more sustainable approaches on how to lower inflammation without weight loss and practicing body confidence. But again, this is all a big preface to say that weight loss should not be your priority when it comes to lowering inflammation. And it's for sure not a great indicator of inflammation getting better. Now, when it comes to lab work, there are labs that your doctor can use to check for inflammation in your body, like CRP or C reactive protein, ESR, which stands for erythrocyte sedimentation rate, homocysteine, ferritin, fibrinogen. Organic acid tests also measure metabolites in your urine related to inflammation, so like guanylinic or quinolinic acid, kynurenic acid, hippuric acid, lactate, pyruvate. These are all organic acid tests that um, are great indicators of inflammation status. But these tests are also pricey and they're not easily accessible to people because of the fact that they are super expensive. But practitioners that run these labs aren't also all over the place as a general doctor would be. Also, some markers don't point to specific conditions. So, for example, a high CRP or ESR levels show inflammation, but they don't tell you the exact cause, which can make a diagnosis a bit vague here. So, when I was in the middle of my first flare up, I had a neurologist run CRP labs, and CRP will tell you it's an indicator of inflammation, right? So, of systemic inflammation. So, CRP will say, yes, there is systemic inflammation going on, but it's not what's going to cause a diagnosis. So, in the 6 months that it took me to get my diagnosis, sometimes my C reactive protein or CRP, it was high. And then sometimes it was fine. But the times that it was fine didn't mean that I was inflammation free, obviously, because I couldn't feel my arms or my legs or my face. But these levels can also vary based on your genetics and your lifestyle and other factors. So at the end of the day, it's really crucial to take a look at how you feel overall than relying on any lab tests or number on the scale for that matter. So, with that said, today I want to emphasize on the importance of tuning into how you're feeling as a sign of inflammation getting better, inflammation improving. Remember, we talked about building our internal awareness a couple of weeks ago? Well, we're going to continue that focus unintentionally this week, but pretty much we're going to be continuing that conversation just a little bit. By tuning into how your body feels and using those internal cues, you can gauge your progress. This approach will give you quick feedback and help you experience regular successes that are going to keep you motivated on your journey so that you can keep going and keep making more and more progress. So, I want to start us off with the most obvious way to know that your inflammation is improving, which coincides with your symptoms improving. So, one clear sign to know that your efforts to lower inflammation are working is if you notice improvements in the symptoms that led you to go to the doctor in the first place. So, for me, I had numbness and pins and needles all over my body and my face, and I had trouble balancing, I had head pain, I had fatigue, and I knew that my inflammation was subsiding when I realized that those symptoms were getting better. So I could walk normally again. The head pain was subsiding. I was getting more energy. The pins and needles were slowly but surely disappearing. So I want you to think back to how you felt when you were diagnosed and think of the things that you were feeling when you were like, I should go to the doctor. And even if only some of those symptoms are starting to improve or some of those symptoms have completely improved, that's a positive sign that what you're doing today is making a difference. So you need to keep going and doing what you're doing. Improvement in your energy levels are another sign that your inflammation is getting better. When it comes to chronic inflammation, this often causes fatigue by disrupting your immune system and increasing your body's energy needs. So, when inflammation decreases, your energy levels typically improve. You might notice that you're not falling asleep at your desk anymore, you need fewer naps, um, or you're having more motivation to tackle things in the day, like exercise and cooking dinner. These improvements are great indicators that the steps that you're taking to reduce inflammation are working and helping you feel more energetic and engaged in your daily life. Better digestion is also another sign that your inflammation is improving because when there's inflammation, most people sometimes, believe it or not, this also kind of just goes unnoticed with most people. But when there is inflammation, you might experience symptoms like bloating and constipation, diarrhea, and just like general aches and discomfort because there's a imbalance of beneficial gut bacteria, which is also more scientifically known as gut dysbiosis. And leaky gut is typically involved not just with gut inflammation. So there are some inflammatory diseases that are more concentrated in the gut, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So there are digestive inflammatory diseases like irritable bowel syndrome, IBD, celiac disease. So these are specific to the gut, but gut inflammation also is really pertinent in other inflammatory diagnoses as well. As inflammation decreases, though, you might notice that your digestion is also improving. You might notice that you're pooping a bit more regularly, you're feeling less bloated, so your clothes are feeling a little bit better on you. There's less belly aches. These are all positive changes that indicate that your gut inflammation is reducing and your whole body is healing. The fourth indicator here that your inflammation is improving is if you notice reduction in joint pain and stiffness. So, reduced joint pain and stiffness is a major sign that inflammation is improving. And let's be clear, guys, joint pain and aches and stiffness is not just for the older folks, my millennial friends. When inflammation markers are elevated, they often make joint pain worse, especially in conditions like arthritis. But you can also experience joint pains and aches related to other inflammatory conditions and autoimmune diseases like celiac disease, lupus, fibromyalgia, and even with MS. When inflammation goes down, though, you'll notice that you can move more easily, you feel less stiffness in the morning, You are relying less on pain medication. So if you are noticing that your joints are a bit more limber, best believe this is a sign that you are on the right track to improving inflammation. Better blood sugar control is also a sign that inflammation is improving. Chronic inflammation can mess with how your body handles insulin. If you're not too sure what insulin is, it's a hormone that helps move sugar out of your blood and into the cells for energy. And when inflammation is high, it sends out signals that interfere with insulin's ability to do its job, leading to what's called insulin resistance. So your body will literally become resistant to insulin. This means that your cells stop responding to insulin properly, causing your blood sugar to stay higher than it should. Over time, this is going to make it harder for your body to regulate blood sugar levels and can increase your risk for diseases like diabetes. Lab tests like fasting blood glucose and A1C or hemoglobin A1C, which your doctor can order, are helpful to track this. And I know that in the spirit of today, I'm giving you ways to know if inflammation is improving. So I want to say that you can tell if your blood sugar is in good standing if you no longer feel hungry like an hour or two after your meal, or maybe you stopped experiencing energy crashes, so feeling really sleepy after eating. This is all a good sign and a good indication that your blood sugar and inflammation are getting better. Improved mental clarity is another sign that inflammation is getting better. Chronic inflammation can affect brain health by disrupting the production of neurotransmitters, leading to issues like anxiety, depression, and brain fog. This was a big deal for me during my flare up. I had trouble concentrating. I always felt like I was in a daze. I also would explain it to people like I felt like I was drunk when I wasn't. I'm sure that anxiety had some part to play here, but obviously, who isn't going to feel anxious when they're going through a big health crisis? But needless to say, when inflammation is reducing, these cognitive and emotional symptoms also improve. You might notice that you feel a bit more focused. You are able to get through the tasks of the day. You feel less anxious. You're experiencing fewer mood swings. I know firsthand that it can be a super big relief to finally feel like mentally sharp again after struggling with fogginess that inflammation has caused for so long. And then finally, the last indicator here to know that your inflammation is improving is if you notice that you're not getting sick as often. And for a while, I want to say I was pretty much on a schedule where just about every 3 months I was getting sick with some kind of like cough or cold or whatever. Chronic inflammation can weaken the immune system, making you more vulnerable to frequent infections and a slower recovery rate. So, inflammation is a immune response. And when it becomes chronic, that means your immune system is constantly working. So, this obviously will weaken your immune system. And when inflammation is also high, your body is constantly in defense mode, leaving fewer resources to fight regular illnesses like the cold and flu. And then once inflammation is under control, your immune system becomes more efficient, it becomes more sharp, and you might notice that you are getting fewer colds or your recovery time is generally quicker. Maybe you're just feeling like less run down. I know that once I started addressing key inflammatory triggers, I think I went probably 2 or 3 years without getting a cold or the flu until COVID came around, and then that all went to shit. So, as you can see, there are so many ways to tell if your body is healing from inflammation that don't involve a number on the scale or constant lab work. And my goal here isn't to say that you shouldn't check in with your doctor regularly. You should definitely do that. But I wanted to point out these indicators to ease any anxiety that you might have if you're feeling like you need lab results or weight loss to prove that you're making progress. And I mean, I've been there too. I've been fixated on my weight or lab numbers, but over time, I realized that health is not black and white. There are tons of nuances here. Everyone is different. The numbers don't always reflect the whole picture. Like I said earlier, when I was in the middle of a flare up, my CRPs were up, they were down, they were in between. But clearly, it wasn't fine science because I still couldn't feel my body. There definitely is value in lab work. I'm not saying that there isn't, especially functional medicine tests, because they can provide so much insight to certain physiological functions, but they're also just really expensive and often inaccessible. And honestly, I wish I could offer them in my practice, but legislation in New York prevents me from ordering them. And I'm just telling you this because even if you did have the money for these really expensive lab tests, it's a pain in the ass to find someone who can offer these lab tests, but who can actually interpret them correctly. So, as for your weight, I know that it is tough to stop focusing on the number on the scale and to shift to how you feel as a true measure of health. But think about how you feel right now, paying so much attention to the number on the scale. You're overwhelmed, you're anxious, you're pressured, and it causes you to stress, which really moves you away from improving your health. And also, it makes you hate the journey that you're on, which means that you're less likely to stick to these new habits long term. And focusing too much on numbers also sets us up for a false finish line. Like hitting a certain weight or a lab result means that you've made it. But health isn't something that you achieve once and then you stop working on it. That's why I continue to preach small, sustainable change, because when your changes feel attainable and authentic to you, they're much easier to maintain. And these indicators that we talked about today are real and authentic ways that your body is trying to speak to you. And once we just take a step back and listen, we get to gain real perspective on the progress that we've made and relieve some of the stress and pressure that we feel to prove anything using a number. So I really hope that you found value in today's episode. If you did, please leave a review and share this episode with someone who you think might also benefit from our conversation today. Please don't forget to reach out to me on Instagram. I'm at Better with Carbo. I'd love to hear from you and hear what you thought about this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time.